Okay, hello everyone. Once again, today we'll be talking about technical illustration, and I will begin this presentation here right now. So we will be dealing with a couple of questions and how a particular solution is able to address probably day-to-day requirements. Once again, to recap, my name is Alex Clark. I'm a business consultant with INTERCAD based in Melbourne. And that's my email address in case you'd like to send me any follow-up emails later down the road. All right, as usual, for those whom I've met online before, thanks again for your continued support. I see some familiar names out here. As always, I'd like to ask for the questions to be held to the end of this session. I will be allocating some time for that. And let's go into the topic itself. Now, today we will be talking about technical illustration and basically the whys and hows. And this is a common question that I get asked all the time. Why technical illustrations? Isn't the CAD drawing enough? And that's a very valid question to ask, especially if we come from a CAD environment. Well, this is what we work with on a day-to-day basis: bills of materials, balloons, line types, and all this. Now, this is information that engineers would require. Engineers would make use of, the guys down in the production floor would need. Now, one thing about engineering drawings is it conveys a lot of information for a very specific use. For example, manufacturing, the requirements, the tolerance, surface finishes, and all this. All this are useful information for very specific applications, and this is why we have drawings at our disposal. However, technical illustrations address a slightly bigger area of things, and effectively it addresses the need of the community beyond the engineering environment. It also helps to address certain areas that technical people may or may not need. But very important, technical illustration is meant to present visual information to generic users. And when I say generic users, I talk about things such as users, both technical and non-technical. Imagine someone who buys, for example, a mobile phone. He or she doesn't need to know what the tolerances are of the different components, what the dimensions are. He or she will need to know how to use it, how the battery should be assembled. And this is information that engineering drawings are not suitable to address. And therefore, that's where we go into the field of technical illustration. How do we address this? Now, I'm sure most, if not all of us here in the audience are familiar with SolidWorks. SolidWorks is a 3D CAD software and it's under the umbrella of Dassault Systems. There is a sister software, if I may call it, called 3D VIA Composer, and this software works in conjunction not only with SolidWorks. It's not strictly limited to SolidWorks. It works with practically any 3D application out in the market. What it addresses are two very specific areas of supporting activity that falls through after engineering data is created. It addresses areas such as marketing material, brochures, instruction manuals, very fundamental things that we take for granted on a day-to-day basis. A very typical example of, for example, a user guide for a non-technical person would be, for example, if you bought a piece of flat-packed furniture from a DIY store. Very often you will realize that the instruction material there have very minimal words. However, the information that's conveyed there is very, very clear to the extent where you practically know what hardware to use to fix what to where. And you do not need to have a rocket science degree or at least an engineering degree to understand what's going on. The other aspect of 3D VIA Composer is interactive and web-based content. I've touched on this on a previous webcast before, but I'd like to just recap some of these things. Instructional materials. Now, they can be both soft and hard copy. There is this push to be more environmentally friendly, and one of the best ways we can address this is actually to reduce the dependency on drawings, hard copy drawings. However, there is still a need to convey information. How do we do that? Now, imagine being able to provide web-based instructions or maybe even information that can be downloaded onto a tablet and provide an overview to the user how things should be done without having to print out a manual. Of course, in addition to that, marketing and promotional material or even supporting documentation on how-tos and the whatnots of your product can be very easily created under the area of promotional material. This is also what 3D VIA Composer is set up to do. However, these two are generally very broad topics, so my emphasis today will concentrate on the static aspect of things. I will touch briefly because there is a bit of overlap between the two areas of interactive and static content. However, my emphasis of the presentation today will deal with static content. Now, if there is, and I'm sure there will be, interest in the other aspect of things, which is the web-based and interactive material, please drop me a mail. I'll be happy to address that area also. Okay? So, all well and good. Let's take a look at how we do things. Now, for many of us, our starting point is here, and it's called SolidWorks, right? Now, SolidWorks, of course, is a very good source of the for a starting point, simply because we have access to the material that we need to work with, that is the CAD data. And this information is what we have, this is what we work with, and it's very, very useful, don't get me wrong, for us engineers and designers. I'm a user myself too. However, there is a lot of information that can be conveyed without using the CAD software, but basing your information on the CAD data that you can pull out. For example, think about it. You've got file properties that would come in very handy. We'll take a look at this later. What else could there be for us to work with? Let's take a look at this. All right. You've also got data such as your configurations in your assemblies and parts. This will also come in very handy along the way. But for now, this is the data we will be working with right now. There is another world though. There is another world which goes beyond the CAD environment, and that's the environment of having to work with the manuals, the hard copy manuals. Again, today my emphasis will be on hard copy deliverables. All right, and here what I have is a manual, a blank manual that would have already been worked on by the person who is in charge of the technical publications, basically user guides, instruction manuals, and so on and so forth. And this information is being set up in a software that can be very easily used for this task. It's called Microsoft Publisher. You are not, of course, restricted to Microsoft Publisher. I like Microsoft Publisher because I'm familiar with it. That said, you can always use something like Microsoft Word, although it's less flexible when it comes to technical publications, or Illustrator, PageMaker, those sort of software. Feel free to use any of those. All right, let's minimize this. Now, so where do we start? Our starting point would be, of course, 3D VIA Composer. We have now gone beyond the CAD environment. All right, and what we have here right now is 3D VIA Composer. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to take a look at how we can very quickly and easily create our data. I'll start off by creating a blank document template. Now, this can be practically anything. This is going to be, for example, the outline of my document that I'm going to work with. And from here, as you can see, I've got effectively quite a logical user interface. Anyone who's using SolidWorks will find this relatively familiar. First, I'm going to start off by creating my documents from scratch. And you will find that you have a whole host of options when it comes to the file types you like to work with, right down to native files from specific CAD software or neutral file formats such as IGES or STEP. Long story short, on this level here, you're not restricted to the CAD software that you're using, or even if you have customers or suppliers who are not using SolidWorks, they are not going to be restricted from using this software at all, as much as I would like them to be using SolidWorks. Now, since I'm a SolidWorks user here, I'm going to make use of this SolidWorks assembly. And I'd like to just call out the SolidWorks information. For example, if you notice, 3D VIA actually has access to the configuration information of the assembly that I'm going to work with over here. So let's hit and open. And what happens right now is we are just going to be importing directly a SolidWorks assembly. And what very quickly you will realize is that I might not necessarily be a CAD user. It doesn't matter. I am still able to manipulate the data as and when I need to. For example, right now what I've done is I've just imported a 3D model from SolidWorks itself. And with this, I've set the foundation for the first view that I need to publish to my document later. So let's capture this as view 1. From here right now, let me just show you how easy it is for a non-CAD user to manipulate your 3D data. For example, I'd like to just create a exploded state involving this couple of bolts here, this cover, and this bolt itself. Very quickly, I just pull this apart. Again, bear in mind that the person who might be working on your 3D data might not necessarily be a CAD person. It doesn't matter. What I've done here is I've just shown how the parts can be removed to open up the cover, and I'll capture this as view 2. Following this, I'll just go hide this off. Alright, I'll hide off these components here, and let's spin on over to this side. I'd like to show how the grinding wheel of this product here can be removed. I'm dragging out the entire assembly. I could do that, or very quickly, again like what I did just now, I can just go on to make use of other forms of transform options that I have. I'm just going to make use of a linear transform for now, which effectively gives us a spaced out set of components, which is exactly what I would want for my view number 3. What you would notice up to this stage in time is how easy it is for a non-CAD user to manipulate, to access and manipulate 3D CAD data. So let's take a snapshot of this. This is view number 3. Now for view number 4, let's drag and drop view number 1 again. I like to base something else on view number 1. I need to also create, for example, an exploded view and set the stage for my bill of materials later. Now what I'm going to do is I will need to work with this sub-assembly alone. So let me just do a hide rest, which is what I've done over here. And right now, very quickly, just drag this out over here. Let's move this set of components, drag this one out, move this over here. That's how we can very quickly manipulate our parts also. Once again, we might take this for granted, but just think about the situation where we actually have to have someone who's a non-CAD person to manipulate this CAD data. What you will realize here is it's actually very, very simple. Now, I've got this set of components here. Let's select this ones and the bolts over here. And I like to move this out. Now, of course, in SolidWorks or any CAD system, we could create exploded views by defining the distances and all. With 3D VIA Composer, we can very easily copy the location of other components and make use of them to locate components in 3D space relative to one another. Again, adding to the simplicity of manipulating 3D CAD data in the environment that's outside the CAD. And finally, I like to just move out this sub-assembly over here. I could of course do an XYZ drag, or I could ensure that everything remains in a plane and make use of the triad and very quickly move my parts out here. And finally, I've got this set of bolt and nuts here, which I need to move them out again. So let's drag this out and out. Again, you will find that, imagine if I wasn't a CAD user, how easy this would be to create my views that I require for my technical publication. At this stage in time, I created 4 views. This is generally how working outside the CAD environment would be while we actually maintain the control over the movement of parts and assemblies. So you're going to say that, right, I can do all this in SolidWorks. Yes, you could. But think about it. What if the person who's in charge of the manuals wasn't a CAD person or didn't have access to the CAD software? All right. So I've shown a quick overview how we can very quickly create different views for our publications. Now, it's more to it than just that. Of course, for our manuals, there are different requirements for our manuals. For example, maybe view 1 is going to be the cover picture. So we like to add some quality to it. We can add some render, for example, the different styles of presentation. We can have it with outline, shaded illustrations based on certain standards. Can we customize this? Of course you can. There is always a customized setting for the render mode. If we like, we could create, for example, a flat technical view. But since this is going to be the front cover, I'll say smooth with outline, and you've got a couple of options here what kind of outline style you like. In addition to that, maybe I like to put a mirror on the ground with grid and put some shadows. And a final touch here, I like to turn on the perspective to make it look more realistic, since this is going to be a cover image anyway. What else can I do here? As I zoom in and out, maybe I like to just change for this part here. Alright, the rendering standards. Right now there's none. I like to put it chromic with color to make it a bit shinier, and same here. Add a bit of chrome effect to this, and you'll find that it's a nice shiny thing. You can obviously go on to add the rest of it. And I'll just update this view to this. This will be our cover image. In view 2, disassembly. Now, I just select this bolts here just to show you how easy it is to detail drawings for technical illustrations. I like to create exploded lines here. Now, you will find that under the authoring tools, there's a whole list of functions right down to adding dimensions and distances and so on and so forth. I like to just create very quickly the paths, an associative path here. Just by selecting the bolts, the software creates it for me. Now, at any moment in time, the software gives me the flexibility to edit the different definitions of lines here. If I like to change of color, change of line types, and so on and so forth. Of course, we have very specific requirements. For example, maybe for manuals, we will need a certain standard. For the guys in the shop floor, we might need a different standard. Now, rather than to keep resetting this information, we can always make use of the styles capability. Right now, I've got a set of predefined labels and line types. And by simply selecting the predefined style, I get that particular setting applied to the information automatically. Very quickly and easily done. Let's update this view. Next view here. In addition to the pseudo engineering details, we could also add in additional visual information that is not typical of engineering data. For example, I've got some arrow types to select here. Let's start off with a linear arrow type. I like to just show that all these parts should be headed in this direction. Once again, I could preset all this information with a style, or we could just very quickly drag this. Let's turn off the stay on top. The shape looks pretty decent. We can change it if we want to, and I like it to be in gradient, and that's the arrow. Same goes for your circular arrow, say around the grinding wheel. Alright, let's select this edge here, and I'd like the arrow to be roughly here. Again, very quickly and easily, I can resize, reshape, even by dragging the drag handles that you see on screen here. I'd like this again to be opaque, and it shouldn't be on top, so I'll turn off stay on top, and I'll have it flat. And finally, maybe I'll turn on gradient mode just to add a bit of visual realism. Again, this is unnecessary information from an engineering standpoint, but imagine the amount of information this adds, the value that it adds to the image for the end user when it comes to the installation process. It's a lot easier to explain how things should be done with arrows than writing a thesis on the steps that you need to work with. Of course, it's as always more than a pretty picture, and let's take a look at view number 4. View number 4, like I mentioned earlier, is meant for the bill of materials. So we need to get down to creating bill of material type information. Let's just go on to select these bolts first. Now, these bolts here, the first thing I like to do is I like to create an associative path from neutral, which looks pretty good until I realize that this line here isn't quite right. Let's tell it to use the world axis so that it aligns information. Don't you wish you could do that in SolidWorks? I do. And I'll apply the same line style over here, and right now everything is set according to how it should be. However, this is going to be a bill of material friendly drawing, so let's put it over here, and I like to change the rendering style to silhouette with sharp edge outline style maybe. Nope, not too right. Maybe I'll have construction edges. That looks nicer. And what I'm going to do right now is to show you how we can create our bills of materials outside the CAD environment. First, we go to this topic called Workshops. That's this little tab on the top here. All right, and I go to Workshops. These are effectively a set of tools that allow you to define what sort of outputs you would like to have. Right now, I would like to create a bill of material. Excuse me, and I've got some bill of material information and all that. I like to just take everything on the first level, and I like to generate the BOM IDs. Now, before I hit generate BOM IDs, I like to draw your attention to the column on the left here. Right now, it's empty. When I hit generate BOM IDs, what happens is the system calls out the data that's available on the components itself. Now, this information can be predefined on 3D VIA Composer itself. Here are some default listings here. But you can also choose to extract the meta properties, the properties that already existed with the CAD data itself. Remember the file properties that existed on SolidWorks itself. We could also call out this information, and some of this information that you see in line here, for example, the description, belonged exactly to that. And from here, let's go on to create the callouts, or what we call balloons normally. And this again, very flexible. We've got some predefined settings if you like to use them. Or we could always put them, for example, to the right here. And after I'm done with this, maybe let's go on to add a magnet line. A magnetic line from here to here. And I'll drag all these balloons, or what they call callouts. They use the term callouts here. I'll drag it and drop it very quickly, attach it to the magnetic line so that I can just move it about as a group, as I so choose to. This is step one. The other thing is, of course, what's the point of having balloons if you didn't have a bill of material? So what I do is I just have the system to show the bill of material that's required. Again, it's based on the information that I've created here right now. All right, and I will just go on to say I want it to be a free bill of material. So I can just drag it and drop it as I like. And when I go to views, just do a right mouse click here and update the view for view 4. Now, apart from just creating static information, like I mentioned, there will be a bit of mention of online data here. Now, I can generate this view for my manuals. At this stage in time, I could also switch to another workshop called Technical Illustration and actually publish this on a web-friendly level. So what I'm going to do here is I'll just have the system preview what I could potentially publish online. Now, what we have here are a set of components with balloons and a bill of material. So what I'm publishing here is a web-friendly piece of document, and what you'll see in a while once Internet Explorer regenerates is that you get automatically a linked bill of material to the balloons, to the components. Now, I could generate a series of these drawings with the related balloons, and I could link this. For example, if I wanted more details on this part here, I could potentially link this part to another bill of material, and when I clicked on this part, instead of just highlighting on the bill of material, we could actually open up a related bill of material source or additional information on a separate document itself. So those are the possibilities that are available to us. But for now, like I said, I'm not going to talk too much with regard to the online material yet, so I shall leave it as that. Okay, let's go back to the outline styles. Maybe I'll just refresh this. So at this stage in time, I created 4 views here. Maybe I like to create a few more views. I need to create, for example, some details of the, let's turn off my information, turn off the ground. I like to create some additional information, for example, details for the motor. All right, so let's go on to move up this view here. And I like to make use of this nifty little tool, which I really enjoy. It's called the digger. And what this digger allows me to do is to very quickly and easily create detailed views to a specific requirement. Right now, I like to just zoom into this area here. All right, I've got several list of options here right now. Of course, there's the zoom in and out, which is what I'm showing here right now. I change this by dragging this lever up and down. So I want it on this level. Now I could potentially do a cross section, like you can see here, or we could do a X-ray view. Finally, I like this one. This is called the onion skin. By dragging it up and down, I can very easily show or hide details based on the view that I've created here right now. Now, for this case here, I'd like, however, to just create the X-ray view of the motor just to add a detail, and I'll capture this as a new view. Alright, and that's what it's created here. Change some minor details, and I've created view number 5. Finally, view number 6, let's go on to create a new view, which is number 6 here. Now for view number 6, what happens is that I might also need to create information. I need to create information that is not within the CAD data or within the tools of the software. For example, I need to create a label, a warning label for operations. I could also create this information here right now. Let's go on to change the mode to maybe flat technical and the outline style to be construction edges. And let's go on to my authoring tools. I could always add in external images. Let's put an image here to promote 3D view. Alright. But in addition to that, I could always add in another image for my warning symbol. Let's go on to look for a nice little image. I should have a warning label somewhere here. I've got a safety label. I open this, and what I've done here effectively is I've just added a new image external to the software. So what I can actually do is I can make use of this software also to manipulate data the way I want it with non-CAD information such as logos, labels, and so on and so forth. So up to this stage in time, I've created 6 views. I'm happy with this. I'd like to publish it out to my manual. So what am I going to do here right now? I'll go back to my workshops again, and I like to create some high resolution images. This would of course enable me to create this high resolution image. Alright, now I could have predefined settings here for profiles. Right now I've got one setting here for cover image with a predefined size. I've got my instruction sheets which have a predefined size based on the documentation information that I require. So first things first, okay, I can define the different settings. It will also, the software also allows me to save multiple views according to a set of rules, which is what I created over here. What I'm going to do now is I'll do a save as, and let's save it out here, bench grinder. I'll just save it into my root location. In addition to that, I need the first view to be a cover image. So let's save the first view here as my cover image, and I hit save. So what's happened right now is I've exported my graphics files into a common location. Let me go minimize this again. And I'll go on now to my operation manual, which I started off earlier. This is how it started off with. Now I'm a Microsoft Publisher, so if I were to go to my graphics manager, you'll find that it's telling me the original has been modified. I could go to each and every view and say update this link, and you get the view updated this way. Or we could do a kill 2 birds with 1 stone step by publishing a PDF file from my publisher document. This will enable me to quite easily update the views and publish a PDF file at the same time. And what happens here right now is this is the output, and we've got the bench grinder, and these are the different views. That's the guards part list, and these are the details of the information that I've created, which is all well and good. That's the PDF files, and this is my publisher file. Now, of course, we all know that design is about change, and the changes that we typically would have to deal with would be, for example, let's go back to SolidWorks. What if there was a design change in SolidWorks? Let's go browse for recent documents. I'd like to open up this file here, and let's consider a design change. I've captured a design change here on the configuration level. We've got a design change. Some parts get changed, which is what I'm going to do here right now. And there you have it. What I'll do is I'll just save up this file now. This is the design change that has occurred, and I don't need this anymore. Let's now go back to 3D VIA Composer. Alright, Now I'm back to 3D Viewer Composer, and how do we deal with changes on this level? First, let's just zoom out here a bit. What I like to do right now is I go on to File, Update, 3D Viewer Composer document. Now before I trigger this off, I just have to give a heads up to everyone. There is a slight chance SolidWorks might hang on me over here, and that's partly due to the fact that I'm using GoToMeeting and there's some conflict with the amount of RAM that I have available on my system. So there might be a slight chance I might need to restart SolidWorks. Alright, but let's hope it doesn't happen. So what we need here is we need to look for the same assembly file, which is this one over here. And this time I'm going to make use of the design change configuration, and I'll tell the system to update. And let's keep our fingers crossed that SolidWorks doesn't hang on me and run out of memory. That's a slight little conflict that we have identified with GoToMeeting, but it seems to be working fine right now. It's launching SolidWorks in the background. It's opening up the file, updating the information that we require, and it's converting the files all over again. What's happening right now essentially is I'm actually reading the 3D data from SolidWorks all over again, updating it, updating my different views, and in a moment you will see what happens. Some refreshes, let the screen refresh, and you find that the data gets updated. So in view 1, let's update view 1. Let's take a look at what view 2 looks like. As you can see here, the information has been updated accordingly. View 3, how does it look like? Same thing. View 4, doesn't matter, we can't see that, but if we had shown the components, it would be there. View 5. Alright, that's view 4. As you can see on screen, I'm sorry, there was a slight lag in the internet there. That's view 5, the file has been updated. And let's go down to view 6 with the warning labels, and so on and so forth. What has happened here right now is that I've captured CAD changes within a non-CAD environment. And in order to ensure that our publications are always up to date on this, I go back now to my high resolution image, and I'll go on to publish my information again. First, let's publish the instruction sheets. I'll just overwrite my existing ones. Nope, I'm not going to save this. Alright, and then I will need to publish my high resolution image one more time, but this time as my cover image. Let's save this, overwrite the first one, hit a save as. What happens right now is I'm just refreshing my information, updating the graphics files that I've created. Let's go back one more time to my Microsoft Publisher. So let's take a look at my Publisher document, which is over here. Once again, Publisher tells me original is modified. Let's go on again. I can manually go and update each and every view, or I could save myself the trouble and publish as a PDF and have the system update my documents and publish the data at the same time. And this is what I've done here. So the views have been updated accordingly. All the parts that are required are there. And that in a nutshell, let me just close up this file here. No, I don't need to actually. That in a nutshell is how we would work with our 3D CAD data to ensure that our 2D publications are kept in line and up to date, regardless of whether we are working within the CAD environment or not. Now looking at the clock here, I have about 5 minutes more, so maybe I'll just go sidetrack a bit and talk about the interactive content. Yeah, actually I've gone a bit faster than I expected, so I'll just spend a bit of time to talk about interactive content. And what I'll do first is I'll start off by showing everyone here how easy it is to create animations with 3D Viewer Composer. First thing I do is I'm just going to switch over to my animation mode. Alright, and I'm just going to work with a subset of this product here. I'm not going to work with everything. Alright, I'll just concentrate on this side of the assembly. So let's go on to show this and hide everything else. Now what I'm going to do here right now is I'm going to just turn this information off, and I'll create a camera view here. I will also have the system capture the location of this part. This is the starting location of my models. Alright. Next thing is I would like at the first second just to show you how easy it is, and I'm using the most basic tools that we have to create our animations. I would like to have this part here, and I capture this camera view here, and this part's over here right now. Alright, we just capture the location of this. 1 second later, I would like this to be out here, and let's say 3 seconds later, on the 3rd second, I'm sorry, I would like this to be here, and then on the 4th second, I like to add a special effect here for all these parts, a special effect to fade out. Alright, I like these parts to fade out. So what else can we work on here right now? Let's go on to hide this part here. I like this part and this part here. Alright, I like to capture this information. 1 second later, I'd like this parts to be moved out here. Again, 1 second later, I'd like the nuts and bolts to be moved out here. I capture this. Alright, and 1 more second later, I want to add in the effect of some parts fading out. So this parts here, I like to add an effect of fading out, and so on and so forth. And finally, I would like at the 8th second for my view to change to this. So let's change the camera view here. All these parts, I just select this. This is the location. And the final second, I like this to be moved out here. And on the 10th second, I like the parts to capture this and fade out. So that's it. That's how you would create very quickly an animation. And let's take a look at how this whole thing looks like right now. There might be a bit of lag because I'm going to be showing this online, but I'm going to save this out as a movie, and if anyone is interested in taking a look at it, you'd effectively see the whole disassembly process of the parts. Alright. Now, I won't be able to show this live to you because there's a lag in the internet, but what I'd like to highlight is how you can bridge the gap from making use of the animations to creating actual interactive information. For example, right now, I'd like to just add some controls to my details itself. On the web, of course, we would probably like to have links and buttons and so on. I can very quickly add, for example, a set of buttons to control my data. What I've done here is I've added some buttons at the beginning of this player here, and I can always define predefined markers to trigger off an event, for example, to call out a bill of material, to call out additional movements and all that. So what I'm doing here right now is that what happens is I've just created an animation and I've added some very simple HTML based controls, and let's turn this off here and watch what happens when I click on the buttons. Now imagine posting this onto your website if you had somebody coming up here and hitting the next button. Alright, you would basically have the information generated accordingly. And let's go on to hit this button one more time. That's the next step. I've turned off the camera view process. Let's move this here. Next. And next. Imagine publishing this entire page online along with, for example, your website information. This is how you can leverage on the interactive process. Now, this is just part of it. I'm just scratching the surface, and there's still quite a bit more with regard to interactive content that I am not going to be able to go into today due to the limitations in time. But this just gives you a glimpse of what you could potentially do. And so with this, let me just go back on to my PowerPoint. This is my bench grinder operator's guide. I don't need that anymore. Just to recap, what I've generally taken a look at today is how we can support the creation of static content to bridge the gap between the content itself, the manuals, the publications, and the 3D CAD environment. What we could also do, I gave a glimpse of, is interactive and web-based content. If you like, drop me an email if you haven't. I haven't already done that to you before. I can actually send you a set of samples of what kind of web-based material can be created with 3D via Composer. Okay, I've got some samples online, and unfortunately I'm not very able to show it live over a webinar due to bandwidth constraints. So to recap my presentation here, I'm in the last leg of it right now. A couple of benefits. One of the benefits of 3D via Composer I'd like everyone to take home today with is the ability for non-CAD users to leverage existing CAD data to work with. And that's very important because as designers, as engineers, we should be working on the technical side of things. However, that shouldn't be a constraint to our design process. It shouldn't, the need to create documentation, instruction manuals, web content, that shouldn't be a hindrance to our primary role. Of course, important point also is that just because someone is not working in CAD doesn't mean that he or she doesn't get to benefit from the associative link between parts, drawings, and assemblies. The benefits here are, of course, very obvious. One of the things that we tend to overlook is that very often, just because we are able to create and manipulate 3D data, that other people can also. Not everyone within the infrastructure of a design environment would have access to our CAD software at any moment in time. All right. There are, of course, other things to take a look at. For example, customer experience. Rather than giving a non-engineer an engineering drawing, why not give him or her information that he or she needs to look at in order to understand how a particular product should be produced. For example, you can create, of course, high-res images and print 3D information. You can also create interactive content that allows a user to better understand what the product is supposed to do. And of course, ambiguity is a very, very big challenge for all of us. At the end of the day, that's something that we really need to take a look at. It's something that from an engineering standpoint tends to be overlooked. Just because we can read engineering drawings doesn't mean that the rest of the world can. In fact, unfortunately, most end users are non-technical people. So at this stage in time, I'd like to just do a quick sidetrack and open the floor to questions. For those who are new to the webcast series, generally I mute off the mic to prevent concurrent questioning. If there's anyone who has questions, please feel free to chime in the chat window, and I'll take the questions as they are received. Any questions, anyone? Or I've given such a clear presentation that there are no questions at all today, which is very rare. First question of the day. Let's take a look at this. Can this be done in SolidWorks, or do you need 3D via? When you say this, what do you mean by can this, Sean? I don't quite understand that. What do you hope to do? We are new to SolidWorks, so not sure about the process. Can the manual? Oh, I see. Can the manuals be made from SolidWorks? Well, SolidWorks is a CAD software, so what you would publish from SolidWorks would be an engineering drawing. No, you can't use SolidWorks to publish technical illustrations. That's why you need a sister product like 3D via to use the CAD data to create the technical illustration kind of images. Any other questions? You're welcome, Sean. How to add notes into published documents. Sure, I could do that. It's actually quite straightforward. Mark, you asked that question. Effectively, you just place it in one moment. Okay, there's this question of how we would place add notes to published documents. I'm going to very quickly flip over to my 3D Viewer Composer again. Let's go back to the technical publication aspect of things. Let's say, for example, I choose one of the views, maybe this view over here. All right. If I like to add a note, we could very quickly, one moment, okay, let me just clear out some room on my screen here. We could very quickly add in labels, for example, to add notes and all. So these are all the different options that you have, with or without a leader. That's the most common method. So now if I can add a label here, and this label can be very easily linked to notes externally. For example, right now, if you notice on the left-hand column here, what kind of text is this? What kind of text stream? Do you want it to be a label? Do you want it to insert a particular property? Do you want to link it to a particular document? And so on and so forth. So, yep, this is how you would create your information. Effectively, it's quite similar to SolidWorks, except that you can link it. You can also type in information. Like, for example, this is a note. You could also link it to external documents if you like to. All right. Hope that answers your question. All right. Can you import video files as part of the presentation? You can link video files to your thing. Yes, definitely. Effectively, you just have your video file as a standalone file. So you would add a link. It's just like in a website, you would add a link that when you click on, for example, the balloon of a particular in the bill of material, rather than linking it to the bill of material, you just point it to a video. So the short answer is yes, you can. All right. Any questions? Any more questions? We've got about 5 minutes. Mo, is there a trial version available for Composer? I believe there is, Mark. I'll need to find out about that. The only thing I'll probably need to, and I always give this this heads up to anyone who gets a trial version, is that it is not CAD software. I've had users who actually got their hands on a trial version, and they said that, hey, it doesn't work like SolidWorks. And the first thing I have to say is, it is not SolidWorks. So it works slightly differently. But yes, I believe there is, Mark. I'll have to follow up with you on that. So if you could drop me a reminder email later after this thing, I will follow it up with you. More questions? $49.50. All done. No worries, Mark. Thank you. Today's an easy webinar. I normally get so many questions, I have to actually put some of them off. There are not that many today, are there? No worries, Sean. If there are no more questions, yeah, basically I've come to the end of this presentation. If you do, however, think of questions just after I log out. Now, there are a couple of ways you could reach me. However, there is one question I would challenge you to ask yourself. What kind of return on investment do you get for using 3D Viewer? What loss in productivity are you going to be addressing when you get designers doing manual related work rather than the designing work? Question for you to think about, a question for you to chat maybe with your contacts at INTERCAD. But like I said, if you've got more questions, there are several things you can do. And the next steps that I would like to address, if you like, we could get you a proposal or give you more details, brochures and so on. Ideal case, I'm sure your sales guy would love to hear you say, is 3D Viewer. Oops, I just got another question, I'm sorry. Is there a more cost-effective way to start using SolidWorks without buying an expensive seat? Ooh, that's a very touchy question. I'd like to take that question offline if you don't mind, because there's no short answer to your question, Ziggy. You mind dropping me an email? Robin, the cost now, that would be a question for your account manager. If you're not sure who your account manager is, drop me an email. I will be happy to direct you to him or her, because seriously, I don't know what the price is off the top of my head. I usually make it a point not to know, because this is a technical presentation. But like I said, if you've got questions, the first person you should contact is your account manager. All right. If you're not sure who your account manager is, I would be worried slightly, not much, but this is my email address. Drop me an email. I will redirect your queries to your respective account managers. I'll be happy to do that. All right, Ziggy. Same for you, Robin. I'm not sure who your account manager is, but I hope you do know. All right. That's my email address. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I hope you found this a good use of your time. My name, once again, is Alex Scott. I'm a business consultant with INTERCAD based out here in Melbourne. This has been a presentation on 3D via Composer, and I'm signing off right now. Thank you and have a nice day. Goodbye.